Now I've wanted to do this video for bloody ages, where I take a very cheap Airsoft AEG, something that a lot of players would turn their noses up to, and turn it into a beast. And I wanted to do it all on the cheap to show you just how easy it is to get a super cheap airsoft gun like this and get it to perform like the high-end builds that many can only dream of. Now when I say performance, what are we looking for? Well, in my opinion, accuracy and range are the key areas we want to focus on. Now I play exclusively woodland and field with a few buildings here and there, but even in CQB you will still want that range and accuracy, because if you could get a gun to shoot incredibly well out to long ranges, then it will be even more lethal at closer ranges. I'm not too arsed about fire rate. Don't get me wrong, we all like to hear a DSG dump its mag in less than a second, but I prefer more sustainable fire rates. And it would also be nice to have a reasonable trigger response too, but again, people get caught up in the minutiae. They're always squabbling over a few milliseconds of trigger response. Let's be honest, most people's self-awareness will cancel that out anyway. We're not trying to win airsoft top trumps here. We're trying to make a build that is accessible and effective. So let's talk about the base gun. This is a Cyma CM 520 AK-47. Now there's some tactical buying involved here because we want a nice big long inner barrel and something that is easy to get parts for. And I paid a grand total of £110 for this Cyma CM 520. Now I bought 3 mid caps as well for another 30 quid, but if you really want to save some pennies, just use the high caps it comes with. For some reason this came with 2 high caps out of the box. I don't know why, I thought it was only supposed to come with 1. And the mag it comes with is a 520 round high cap. Spend another 8 quid and you can have 2, and then you can jungle style them together like this, so you don't need any pouches. There you are, that's all you need, that's your loadout. You don't need to have any tack gear or anything like that. You've got 1,000 rounds on tap just like that. If you want to do a really basic, simple, cheap loadout, you're pretty much there already. And if you're too snobby to use this sort of loadout, that's your loss. And speaking of snobbiness, this is a gun that is very commonly seen as a site rental. And that's where I first encountered it. Many moons ago at another site, I had a shoot of a rental Cyma AK of this exact model. And it didn't just shoot well for a rental gun, it shot well in general. It was incredible. The pellets, God knows what weight they were, probably .2s, and they'd probably been sitting in that mag for God knows how long. They went for miles. It was outranging some guns that I knew people had spent, you know, a pretty penny on. I don't even think they had a chance of reaching me with their far more expensive builds. And just quickly back to the whole snobbery side of things. I really don't like the whole beginner, intermediate, expert difficulty ratings that airsoft shops seem to have nowadays. I've been doing airsoft for near as damn it half my life, around about 12 years. I'm 25 now, and this is not a boast. I've owned a lot of airsoft guns and shot shitloads more. I've used thermal sights, drones, RPGs, landmines, and there's so much more in the pipeline. There's still so much for me to experience, but I've also had the privilege to have done so much in the airsoft world. And I will tell you that I was just as excited for this thing to turn up. An airsoft gun that is considered a beginner gun, or at worst considered a rental gun. And with my past experience of this thing, I knew that with a bit of fiddling, this thing could be an absolute scythe. Getting the best out of an AEG isn't nearly as complicated or expensive as a lot of people think. Bearing in mind that with like everything out there in the world, there are plenty of companies trying to sell you solutions. We want to get the most performance out of the least cost and effort. Pareto's principle, 80-20. How can we get the most out of the least? What can we change which will make the biggest difference? And for accuracy and range, we need to focus on 4 things: barrel, hop, velocity, and the ammo. And let's work our way from the barrel backwards. The inner barrel on an airsoft gun, in my opinion, is the most influential component when it comes to range and accuracy. We want it long and we want it tight. And one of the reasons why that rental AK shot so far and so accurately is the sheer barrel length. This has a 455mm inner barrel, which goes from about there to here, which is humongous in the airsoft world. We're getting towards sniper territory, and to be honest with you, a lot of VSRs might only have like a 420mm or a G-spec length barrel in anyway. Most M4s in the airsoft world have a barrel length roughly half of this, at most round about 363mm off the top of my head, and compared to MP5s and G36s, you pretty much over double their barrel length. Now, is there an ideal barrel length? Yes, as long as possible. Of course, you want to be able to move around with this thing, so you don't want it a metre long because you're going to pole vault if you trip over. And one thing that people like to do is they like to put a suppressor on the front end and then run an extra long inner barrel through the suppressor. I don't like that. I want it to be the same barrel barrel length that the gun came with, and we're not getting into all this volume nonsense and shit like that. It's a complete waste of time. You are, most of the time, I don't even see how it makes a difference. And to be honest with you, there's so much of this in airsoft where people get caught up in these equations and complexities where they're weighing their piston and trying to drill holes in things. Half the time, any improvement it can make is so small, it is effectively an anomaly. The next metric we need to pay attention to is the barrel bore. And as I said earlier, we want it as tight as we can. Most airsoft guns, especially cheaper ones, something like this, would come with a 608mm bore barrel, which is considered standard bore. Nowadays, we're seeing a lot of airsoft guns coming out of the box with tight bores already installed. A tight bore is exactly what it sounds like. The barrel bore is tighter, so that way there's less gap between the pellet and the barrel walls. And what does this do? Well, first of all, it helps improve the air seal between the pellet and the barrel bore. And this can increase muzzle velocity. Going from personal experience, a 608 to a 603 can add around about 30 FPS in most cases. Worth quickly adding that longer barrels also increase velocity as the pellet has more time to accelerate with the air behind it. Now, an increase in velocity could make a gun hot, which is slang for an airsoft gun firing above FPS limits. But if that's the case, you can then get away with putting a weaker mainspring in the gearbox, which will improve the fire rate, the responsiveness, and it will also reduce the strain on the mechanics of the gearbox. Aside from the increase in efficiency from the tighter air seal, a tight bore barrel will also help stabilize the pellet quicker, as there is less space for the pellet to bounce around in the barrel. And in practice, tight bores will give you a flatter trajectory, better accuracy, and because of the flatter trajectory, it means your hop kicks in later, and therefore you get increased range. Switching a barrel for a significantly tighter bore barrel will make a very noticeable difference immediately. You chuck a Marble 603 Black Python in a gun that has a 608mm barrel in it, and you'll see a massive improvement straight away. And I'm talking from a lot of personal experience. The Marble 603 Black Pythons are one of my favourite barrels, and we've chucked them in guns with pretty much everything else stock, and it's turned them into lasers. Now, I personally wouldn't bother changing the bore of the barrel if it's not that much tighter than the stock barrel. A 608 to a 603 will make a huge difference, but if you're going from, say, a 603 to a 601, I wouldn't bother. But can you go too tight? Not really, no. Nowadays, the ammo tolerance has got a lot better, so it's a lot more precisely machined. And in fact, one of the best performing airsoft guns I've used is my Bolt AKS 74U, which out of the box came with a 600. But what about pellets jamming in the barrel, which is an argument levied against super tight bores? The fact is, the measurements we are talking about are minute. If your pellets are that swollen or misshapen, or there's enough crap on them to jam a 601, it'll pretty much jam in anything else. I can't think of a single moment out of the whole time I've been doing airsoft where I've had a pellet jam in the barrel. I've had them jam in hop units from having too much hot pressure on, or the hot rubber getting stuck and folded into the barrel, but I've never had one get stuck in the barrel on its own. And you don't need any nonsense like the rifled barrels or the alignment slots in, say, like the Miracle barrel. How can you misalign a perfectly spherical object? Nor do you need some ported or crazy jet style muzzle. The slower turbulent air behind the pellet isn't going to reach that pellet. It's not going to cause any problem. Most of those gimmicky barrels work well because they're just good tight bores to begin with. That's it. No marketing wank. Keep it long and keep it tight. AOLS, Marble, Black Python, PPS, Action Army. That's pretty much all of the barrels that we use. And we are especially a big fan of the Black Python V2 tight bores, which are like 30 quid. And if you fit it correctly, that 30 quid barrel will make a huge difference straight away. So we've chucked in a 603 455mm tight bore in this AK, full length. Not going to tell you the brand just yet, but it's very good value, I'll tell you that. The inner barrel ideally should have little to no play inside of the outer barrel. If you've got a bit of space where the barrel moves about, I don't know, cut a Coke can up and stuff it down the side to shim it. And some barrels, like the one we've got in this, actually have a notch on the end which allows you to put an O-ring on the end, which will grip onto the inside of the outer barrel to help immobilize it. Now the barrel is done, the velocity is still under the 350 FPS limit for a full auto capable airsoft gun, so we can now move backwards onto the hop unit. And again, there's plenty of nonsense and snake oil out there when it comes to hop units. We want the hop unit to be responsive and stable. Responsive in the sense that we want it to respond to adjustments and be able to lift the pellets efficiently, and stable so that it will hold its setting and be consistent. And the first thing I had to do to this will sort out that bloody slidey hop unit. I do not like sliding hop units because half the time they do not hold their setting. And what I've done is I've stuck an O-ring and a shim underneath a screw to add some extra friction inside the hop unit, so that way the slider takes a lot more force to move it and it's not going to dance around on its own. Credit to Brain Exploder for this idea. For the bucking, my personal go-to for a build like this is a G&G green. They have changed them a little bit over the years, as they used to be a quite soft and grippy low temperature bucking, and if you have a low temperature bucking they usually are softer, which makes them grip the pellet better, and that can make them more efficient, so you can actually end up with more hop lift with less hop pressure. And in regards to the type of bucking, a standard style will do you fine. A standard style is one with just a little rubber bump on it. Flat hops can make quite a difference, and a well executed R hop can be incredible, especially with heavier rounds. And nowadays you can get the maple leaf MR hop, which seems to be a bloody good alternative to an R hop. But we're going to keep this nice and easy, and we're going to go with a pretty standard nub, although it does have a split down the middle, and it's sort of a W hold style bucking. I've got a PDI W hold bucking in my Scorpion, and that thing shoots incredibly well, especially when you consider it only does about 230 FPS. Now when it comes to nubs, normally we have these little rubber tube nubs in a cheap airsoft gun. Nothing really wrong with them. Most of the 350 FPS guns I've got probably have them in. The only thing is there's quite a bit of flex to these, which can impede the consistency and accuracy a bit. But what we've chucked in here is, it's very similar to a Mega nub, a Maple Leaf Omega nub. It's not an Omega nub, but the nub in this is not a Maple Leaf. Again, I'll tell you what it is at the end of the video. It seems to work quite well, and it's nice and solid, so there's less give in it. It's got loads of surface area on it, and also you've got the flexibility of being able to chuck in, say, a flat hop bucking or even an R hop bucking or a Maple Leaf MR hop, and it would work perfectly fine with that nub. And because there's less flex in that compared to a rubber tube, it means that the hop's less likely to bounce around or vary between shots. It keeps it nice and solid. And aside from the sliding adjuster causing me issues, I've not bothered with any more shimming or modification to the hop chamber itself. I did wrap a couple of turns of Teflon tape around the bucking on the barrel just to make sure that the air seal between the barrel and bucking is nice and tight. But when it comes to the hop chamber itself, I very rarely have to change the whole thing in any of the airsoft guns I've used. More often than not, the basic plastic ones are perfectly usable. Now, hop units do not improve accuracy. Sure, a bad hop unit can ruin it, but once you've got a hop unit stable and consistent, you're not going to get any more accuracy out of it. The hop unit's purpose is to increase the range by adding backspin to the pellet. When it comes to accuracy, that's down to barrel length, and as we've mentioned before, bloody great big barrel in this thing. And the reason why is because the barrel's longer, the pellet's got longer to stabilize, and it's also shielded from the elements for longer as well. You want to make sure that your hop unit is in straight and that the barrel and bucking are in the hop unit straight as well. This one's got quite a nice hop unit that properly locks it in place, so it's hard to misalign it. If your pellets are curving off to one side consistently, it's most likely that the hop unit's on the piss, so you just need to straighten it up. If the pellets are deviating all over the place, that's usually a sign that either there's something wrong with the bucking, like there's grease on it, or that the nub isn't working with it, like maybe you need a firmer nub. And one thing also to pay attention for is contaminated ammo. Contaminated ammo is where you accidentally introduce another weight of pellets into a bag or bottle of ammo. And how you can tell that that's happened is when you're firing, it's inconsistent, but it's doing the same sort of two trajectories. So if you've got it set on 2.5s and a 2.5 goes through, it's fine, but as soon as a 2 goes through, it will overhop it. And the first thing you should do if your gun's not firing right, so if the hop unit doesn't seem to be responding properly, your velocity's all over the place, or you just can't hit anything, double check your ammo. Make sure you're using the correct weight, make sure you haven't got it mixed up with anything else, because that can save you a lot of time finding that out early on. Check that there's no air leaks between the barrel and the bucking, so you stick your finger over the end of the bucking and you blow down the barrel. If there's any air leaking around the side, wrap some Teflon tape around it. So to recap on the hop unit, grippy bucking, solid nub, no mechanical play in the hop chamber, make it seal and keep it straight. That's it. And now we move on to the velocity side of things. For this weapon class at my local site, it can fire up to 350 FPS maximum on a 0.2 pellet. And this is a very common velocity in the UK. I don't do things in joules. They don't stop people cheating chrono or whatever the proponents claim. You still need to know the weight of their pellet to calculate joules. If you lie about your weight at chrono, doesn't matter what you're measuring it in, feet per second, meters a second, joules or Kelvin or whatever. If you don't know the weight of the pellet, or if they're lying about the weight of the pellet, it won't change a thing. Straight out of the box, this thing was shooting 308 FPS on 0.25s. And I know that 314 FPS on 2.5s is equivalent to 350 FPS on a 0.2. So we're looking around about 345 FPS equivalent, as I call it, or the velocity equivalent of a 0.2. That's pretty much bang on. That's like 5 FPS under the limit. You want your velocity to be as close to the limit as possible. And consistency wise, it really is not difficult to get, frankly, incredible FPS consistency. If your deviation is like 5 FPS, I wouldn't even bother trying to improve it. When it starts to really badly deviate, that's usually when you've got a catastrophic air leak anyway. So, you know, you got to fix the air leak in the first place, because if you're jumping about 100 FPS up or down, you know, that's you got bigger fish to fry than your consistency. A major air leak will usually be ridiculously low, so you might lose 100 FPS. It will be inconsistent by a substantial margin. A gun like this out of the box, it was like 2 FPS, 1 FPS, 2 FPS deviation. Again, don't sweat the small stuff, because if the air's slightly colder or slightly denser or less dense, the readings will be different anyway. It's all these minor things. In cold weather, the seals might not seal as well. In hot weather, they might seal better, or after you've shot it a while, the seals have all warmed up and expanded. It's not difficult to get very little deviation, single digit deviation on these things. Most of the time, they're probably doing it already. Unfortunately, when I went to use this on the field, the velocity had dropped a little. It dropped to around about 285 on 2.5s, which is equivalent to 320 roughly on a 0.2. That is still a usable velocity. Why did it drop? Probably just stuff bedding in, you know, brand new gun, stuff has to settle down. And I probably wouldn't bother taking this gun apart just to fix that. But if I was doing something else inside this, I would check the air seals, try and get the velocity up, Teflon tape around the cylinder head, a bit of grease around the nozzle stem, or even switching out the nozzle for a one with an O-ring on it, stretching the piston O-ring out. That usually works really well at improving the air seal inside the gearbox. If you do need to change your spring, I do recommend likes of Mad Bull and Garda, SHS. Mad Bulls are my preferred spring, although they're slightly more expensive. Quite hard to get hold of all of a sudden, but Gardas are the second best. Something like this, an M100 will probably be fine. Although if you've got a really long barrel and a really tight barrel, you might need to go down to M95, M90, maybe even M80. I'd say you might want to fix a low velocity if you're below the limit by like 50 FPS or more. If this was doing like 300 rather than 350, let's say, yeah, it's at that point, you know, it probably would be worth intervening. Now, velocity is not the be all and end all when it comes to range, but it bloody helps. A good hop and barrel will get most out of any velocity, but if your velocity is like 100 FPS lower than everyone else, you will get your ass handed to you. And finally, the more boring side of this, we need to talk about ammo. Most of the airsoft pellets out there are probably all made in the same factory. I think GFC pretty much owns everything. And again, there is a point where spending extra money won't really make much of a noticeable difference. For the best range and accuracy, you want as heavy of a weight that your hop unit can consistently lift. Heavier rounds will travel further and keep their backspin for longer because there's more momentum behind them. They will also be a lot more wind resistant compared to lighter rounds, and they also have a better chance of going through light foliage like leaves and grass. But we still want a decent pellet velocity, otherwise it will take an age to reach the target. And it would be nice to use an easy to source and therefore cheaper weight. For the 350 FPS bracket, I tend to default to 0.25 grams. For something like this, 2.5s in my experience are the best of everything. They're very easy to source. These Vorsk 2.5s came from Amazon. They were like 16 quid for a bag of 4,000. The muzzle velocity isn't lowered too much, so the pellet still gets there relatively quickly. And there is a substantial difference between the range accuracy and the wind resistance of 0.25s compared to 2s. You will notice a massive difference, especially on this velocity bracket. Now, the performance difference between 2s and 2.5s is so noticeable that, frankly, I don't know why this wasn't the first thing on the list. You don't want to buy cheap shit, of course, but the sort of mid-range ammo nowadays is pretty much just as good as the high-end stuff. Yes, if you look at them under a microscope, they might not look as smooth, but that doesn't really matter because we're not looking at it under a microscope on the field. BLS, GFC rockets, Spectre, which are just BLS anyway, Tipman, Nuprol, there's a few that I've used over the years, and right now Vorsk has to be one of my favourites. Keep your ammo dry and don't buy too much that it sits around for years on end, as they can actually swell up from the humidity in the air. Try and use bios when you can. That's what I'm trying to do now. I try and get as much bio ammunition as I can. They're perfectly usable, and non-bios can swell up and shatter just like bios can. There's nothing unique about it. And that's it. That's all you need to do to turn a cheap airsoft gun like this into something that will put the big boys in their place. Oh shit, yeah, I've got to tell you about the aftermarket parts, the names of them and where you can get them from and how much they cost. We stuck that O-ring under that shim in the hop unit just to stop it sliding around. We've got that tight ball, we've got the nub, we've got the bucking, and that came to nothing. Seriously, this gun came like this, out of the box. A 603 tight bore, that nifty little bucking, the frigging flat nub, and a pretty damn good velocity. That's how it came out the box. I am not joking you. That's how it came from Patrol Base. I didn't pay for any extra upgrades. That's how Simon seems to sell it. And it even has a bloody quick change spring system. These cheap guns are getting better and better. That is, this completely ballsed up the video idea. I bought this thing thinking I was going to put a Mad Bull 603 Black Python in, put a G&G Green or a Maple Leaf MR Hop, have to upgrade the velocity and all that and get it to be an absolute monster. I've had to do sweet Fanny Adams to it. And yes, I took it apart, but that was actually after I'd used it. That was me finding out that the nub in it is a bloody flat nub, not a rubber tube. I was hoping to do a nice upgrade video where we chuck a 30 quid Type Bore in a 7 quid bucking and get this thing to be a monster. I haven't needed to do any of that. That is the standards of Airsoft now, where you can pay £110 for a bloody plastic AK, pretty much pre-upgraded for range and accuracy. This is probably more upgraded than like half of the Airsoft guns you'll encounter on the field. And this is the perfect demonstrator of all of the principles we've been talking about today. All of the little changes that will make the big difference rather than farting around with minutiae. The key things that will really make a huge difference. Yes, the externals aren't the nicest thing in the world, but you won't give a toss when you're hitting people in another time zone. If you found this video helpful, then please make sure you leave a like. And if you want to support the channel and treat yourself to some Airsoft goodies, then make sure you check out fulcrumairsoft.com and Fulcrum Airsoft on Cults 3D. And if you want to be part of the channel, then make sure you subscribe too. And since we had to do sod all work to this, I feel like you guys need to see a bit more of a lengthy build diary. So you can check out where I HPA'd a M2 Browning machine gun.